Let's talk now about the the moves to elect a new pope after the death of Pope Francis. The papal conclave began to meet yesterday. 133 cardinals, all the cardinals under the age of 80, entitled to have a vote. It's a secret ballot. Takes place in the Sistine Chapel, behind closed doors, windows boarded up, mobile phone signals blocked, you name it. The black smoke was seen rising from the Sistine Chapel chimney yesterday, and that meant that the first vote did not result in a pope being chosen. Black smoke has just been seen in the last couple of moments rising from the chimney yet again. That means their first vote of today has also not resulted in a final result. Well, let's talk about all of this now with Gavin Ashenden. He is a British Catholic layman. He's also an associate editor of the Catholic Herald and former chaplain to the Queen. Very good morning to you.
Julia, hello, good morning.
Thank you so much for joining us. We're expecting two votes today, or they could do two votes. One vote, it appears, has already taken place. If we saw white smoke, that means they'd agreed a new pope. Black smoke means two votes in and they still can't agree. What do we read into that?
It's very exciting. As you were saying in your introduction, this is one of the most difficult elections to call. Actually, they're all very difficult, partly because the process is to go in and say your prayers and ask God for help. It's a bit more than just politicking and choosing your favourite team. So we always knew it was going to be a while. The political analysis is that if you look at it from a liberal-conservative split, that the quicker it happens, the more likely it is to be a liberal. The longer it takes, it may well be somebody more Catholic. So the fact that you've had black smoke this morning is terribly encouraging to somebody like me. And it could be 2 or 3 days. So in the Middle Ages, they took so long once, they took weeks and weeks, that the local people got fed up and they stopped giving them food and took the roof off the building so the rain would drive them to a quick vote. So we don't expect it to work out quite like that, but we don't know how long it'll take.
There are ways of forcing these things come to a decision. And this is the battle, is it, between sort of liberals and conservatives? Because we know that the vast majority of these cardinals were actually appointed by Pope Francis, but who's seems to be regarded as quite a liberal pope. But again, as an atheist, I suppose one can have different views on what counts as liberal or not. But in terms of the things that are being considered by the different sort of factions, and yes, it is very political. It's about where the Pope comes from, what they stand for, what direction they would take the church in. There's an awful lot. I mean, the Western media are obsessed with this. Like, is it someone who is from Africa or from Asia? But will those considerations override the personal preferences of the cardinals making a decision? Some of which may be based on whether they think that a new Pope would look on them very kindly and promote them.
Well, you're raising the biggest question of all, which is, should the Pope be a Catholic? And I mean, we could talk liberal progressive. I'd rather talk about resistance and appeasement, because the civilization that we've been part of is basically built on Christian foundations. Yeah. Of course, there have been a lot of other offshoots, but even secularism and Protestantism were given birth to by struggles within the Catholic Church. So most people agree that we're at a very interesting civilizational crisis for all kinds of reasons. We've got the influence of the left, the growth of Islam. We've got technology with AI, which threatens to rob us of some of our autonomy. I see this much more as a kind of Chamberlain-Churchill moment. Are they going to elect someone who's going to try and appease the culture, which is what I think Pope Francis did? Or are they going to elect someone who's going to resist it and say, look, all the very best things about our culture were actually given to you by the Catholic Church and a vision of Jesus. We're going back to our roots. We're going to resist what is, in fact, taking away some of the most important aspects of our humanity: free speech, freedom of conscience, the value of human beings beyond their economic worth. Those are the kind of core values I think that Christianity brings to this. The question is, are we going to get an appeaser or a resistor?
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting because Pope Francis, he sort of said a lot of the usual sort of woke things on climate change and pro-Palestine and things like that. There seemed to be some questions about his views on homosexuality. Of course, we're not going to have a female pope. We're not one who's openly female anyway, anytime soon. But there is this big battle going on within the church between the sort of, should we say, I mean, conservative is an understatement of some of the African church leaders and many in South America as well. Asia, very, very different from the church in the Northern Hemisphere.
Well, one of the candidates on the resistance side is a very tall, elegant black pope, and it's a bit of a, it's an irony really that people you might think of as conservative want a tall, clever, holy black man as to come to the church. So we don't fall into the kind of woke spectrum criteria quite as much as other people think. But I really think it's about a sense of sort of geopolitical, philosophical analysis. What's happening to the world? How can we protect human beings from some of the forces that threaten to come against us and destroy our society? Democracy, freedom of speech, freedom of conscience, the sacredness of human beings. These aren't things you can take for granted. And who's going to fight for them if it isn't the Catholic Church? And that's not me being tribal, but I look at the political movements we've got and the philosophical movements, and frankly, I don't see anything more attractive than Catholicism, which is why I became one.
Well, that's it. Yeah, and you're as a former chaplain to the Queen and now co-presenter of the Catholic Unscripted podcast. But again, this is the interesting thing. I mean, as an atheist, I completely recognise, the vital importance of the Judeo-Christian culture and history and teachings as a basis of the foundational values of the Western civilization. And anyone who forgets that, I think, really is missing the point. Just finally, very briefly, how significant a role does a Pope play? I grew up at a time when remembering, Pope John Paul II and his role as a Polish man in terms of, what happened with the bringing down of the Berlin Wall and the end of the Soviet Union. He seemed like a very significant figure. Are popes so significant, or is that something that an individual pope can bring to the job?
I think they're hugely significant. I mean, there are two ways of looking at this. One is that we've got our own problems that need dealing with. There's been a sexual scandal and a financial scandal. Catholics are human beings. We suffer the same vulnerabilities as anybody else. The Pope's got to clear those up. But actually, when you think of it, he's the inspired leader of 1.4 billion people. If you can get 1.4 billion people on the same agenda, then the chances of renewing our culture are really very large. If he has the capacity to win the hearts and minds of Catholics and renew the church, the sky's the limit. Well, it's heaven, really, we're talking about.
Thank you so much. So interesting if you joined us. Amazing. At the moment at which we were just coming to that black smoke sharing from the Sistine Chapel, Gavin Ashenden, co-presenter of the Catholic Unscripted podcast, British Catholic Layman. Fascinating, that, Philip. I mean, how significant do you think the Pope is still as a figure?
I think hugely significant. I think the Pope is a unique position to act as a conscience for other world leaders, because he's not running a country. He's got 1.4 billion in
Nobody accountable.
Well, yes, exactly.
Yeah, there we are.